Hello and welcome to episode 163 of the official EstablishTheRun.com podcast. My name is Adam Levitan. I'm one of the co-founders here at ETR, as I will be twice weekly for the next 7 months or so. This offseason, I am joined by fellow co-founder Evan Silva. And Evan, we aren't here to talk top shots. We aren't here to talk punks. We aren't here to talk stonks like seemingly everyone else is on the planet. No, I never thought it'd be unique to talk ball, but we are here to talk ball. What's going on?
What's up, man? We're going to start off with some coaching change analysis. The rosters aren't in. I mean, the draft hasn't happened. Free agency hasn't happened. Cuts, very few cuts have happened so far. So it's going to be difficult to really truly apply, past precedents that specific coaches have set and apply them to rosters because the rosters are far from set. But we do have, background information on coaches, and we can talk about that and talk about their general philosophies. And the coaching staffs at this point are set.
Yeah, I mean, in no other sport do the coaches have as much of an impact on statistical performance as football. Like Kevin Durant changes team, Kevin Durant gets a new coach, James Harden gets a new coach, a new team, whatever. He's going to perform within his range, within his standard range. When NFL players change teams, man, when they change schemes, when they change coaches, it can change a ton. And so I think it's really, really important to start thinking about this stuff as early as possible, how we think it'll affect players, some initial takes. Before we get to today's show, I want to go over a few things related to the 2021 draft kit. Yes, we already have soft launched the 2021 draft kit, already up our best ball rankings for Underdog, for FFPC, for 3-mans, for 6-mans, for 12-mans on Underdog. Eventually, it will be everything we think you need to be ready for your draft, content, and rankings for every format. Note that if you bought our draft kit last year, you'll have access for free now until May. Just log in. You'll be able to access everything. If you're new, it's the same price as last year, $34.99. Can check it out on the site. All right, let's get to these coaching changes. 7 coaching changes at the head coaching spot this season heading into 2021. And Evan, let's start with the Falcons because you called it. You said Arthur Smith was a major candidate to be the next head coach in the NFL, former Titans offensive coordinator. So Falcons fired Dan Quinn after an 0-5 start last year. Raheem Morris leads them the rest of the way. I thought they played better. They ended up going 4-7, of course, under Raheem Morris. Arthur Smith, I look like he looks old, man. If you would ask me how old Arthur Smith is, I would have been like, 47, 50. Dude's only 38. And that's scary to me because I'm also 38. But Arthur Smith looks old, man. I'll give this for Arthur Smith. And one thing that I think seems simple, but most NFL coaches don't do, tailoring your scheme and your game plan to the skill set of your players. Like, I actually don't think it's overly easy to win with Derrick Henry and Ryan Tannehill. Not that they aren't very good players, because obviously they are, but you just can't roll any system out there when you're trying to build around Derrick Henry and Ryan Tannehill. So now he's with the Falcons. Evan, what do you think about the decision of the Falcons to hire Arthur Smith and how he fits in with this Atlanta team?
Yeah, and the Falcons are basically starting from scratch, which I think that they needed. Their roster's old. They have major salary cap problems. That the Tom Dimitroff, Dan Quinn era obviously had run its course. So their new GM, Terry Fontenot, is a young guy, relatively 40 years old, coming from the Saints, who have had a ton of scouting success lately. And this guy, Terry Fontenot, is a scout by trade. And they went with Arthur Smith to run the show as head coach. And we've obviously been big fans of Arthur Smith. Ryan Tannehill, Derrick Henry, you mentioned Corey Davis this past year, Jonnu Smith, all these guys had career years under Arthur Smith over the past 2 seasons. He ran play action at a very high rate in Tennessee, which is promising. He did a good job of fitting his scheme, as you mentioned, to cater to his talent rather than trying to fit the players into a predetermined scheme. And the Falcons still have a ton of talent on offense. And I think that Arthur Smith is absolutely set up to maximize it. And I do think we'll see the Falcons make a more serious investment into boosting their running game because it's been a disaster since Kyle Shanahan left. They finished 22nd or worse in run offense DVOA in 3 straight years. But I still trust Arthur Smith to, create his offense around his talent, and the best talent in Atlanta still in the passing game. And so I think that they're going to feature the passing game under the new staff. I think we're going to see a lot more play action. I recently was looking at long shot MVP bets. Matt Ryan 100-1. I thought that was pretty interesting because I still think that Julio's got a good amount left in the tank. We saw Calvin Ridley, emerge as one of the 10 best wide receivers this past year. I think that Hayden Hurst might play a more prominent role. Arthur Smith's background is as a tight ends coach. And I think he creatively used tight ends throughout his time in Tennessee. So I really like this hire.
Yeah. The Julio thing evaluation is tough from this past year. When he was healthy, because the dude, like as we mentioned before, the dude plays when he's not 100%, right? So like all of his stats are kind of skewed. He was still among the league leaders in yards per route run, which we think is one of the most effective and predictive stats. But man, it was hard to watch him at times out there last year. And so, yeah, he's getting up there in the age model. I believe he's entering his age 32 season. I want to say maybe 33. Matt Ryan's entering his age 36 season. The window here is not huge for Arthur Smith, but as you said, he does have talent and their defense played a lot better last year. Calvin Ridley, I mean, I don't know, Evan, I don't know if you've thought about rankings at all yet. I don't know who you'd have ranked ahead, Calvin Ridley or Julio Jones. I personally would say Calvin Ridley right now, age model, obviously. But yeah, one other thing I wanted to mention here, Dave Ragone, who some of you may mention as Louisville's starting quarterback. It doesn't matter too much, but he'll be the OC because Arthur Smith will obviously be in charge of the offense, but he's been coaching quarterbacks for the Bears. I actually remember Dave Ragone from when he was with Louisville, put up some huge numbers. But yeah, who would you rather have right now, Calvin or Julio?
Calvin.
Just for this upcoming year. Calvin. Yeah.
Yep.
It's got to be. All right, Jaguars. After one of the most successful college coaching careers ever, Urban Meyer was a college head coach for most of the last 20 years, Bowling Green, Utah, Florida, famously, Ohio State. Now Urban Meyer finally, after many flirtations with the NFL, Urban Meyer has been hired to coach the Jacksonville Jaguars. Obviously, I believe a lot of the allure of this is the number one pick, presumably, and almost certainly he'll have Trevor Lawrence. So I think they're going to run, I don't know what they're going to run, but Urban Meyer's run famously spread. And when we had Tebow, he ran a lot of the option and zone read stuff. So first of all, let's talk about how you think Urban Meyer is going to fare in the NFL. Is he going to try to bring college concepts? We've seen that happen before. And what do you think he'll try to do with Trevor Lawrence?
Yeah, so I think that it was notable. I was like reading Urban Meyer's press conference, his opening, his introductory presser. And I think it's notable, but it probably shouldn't be surprising that Urban Meyer, he's not going to call plays for the Jaguars because he did not call plays at Ohio State either. Darrell Bevell, their offensive coordinator, is going to call plays. And I view that as a good thing. After Darrell Bevell ran a very vertical offense in Detroit over the past 2 seasons, which played to Matthew Stafford's strengths, after Jim Bob Cooter, centered the offense around Theo Riddick and Golden Tate, Darrell Bevell comes in. He's like, we have one of the strongest arm quarterbacks in the league. What are we doing here? We're going to throw the ball downfield. And on the occasions that Stafford and Kenny Golladay and Marvin Jones were all healthy, Bevell's passing attack was really good in Detroit. And Trevor Lawrence, almost certainly going to be the Jaguars quarterback. He can obviously rip it vertically. And I also think it's interesting to note that when you look at, the offense is still going to be designed how Urban Meyer wants it. And if you go back and look at his offenses, Urban Meyer in college, he historically made really good use of athletic dual threat quarterbacks. It was Alex Smith at Utah. It was J.T. Barrett at Ohio State, Tim Tebow and Chris Leak at Florida. And Urban Meyer also recruited Omar Jacobs to Bowling Green. He wound up leaving before Omar Jacobs got in there, but he recruited him. Omar Jacobs is like the best quarterback in Bowling Green history, had a cup of coffee in the NFL. I believe it was with the Steelers. He also recruited Cam Newton and Jeff Driscoll at Florida, two amazing athletes at the quarterback position. Jeff Driscoll ran like 4.56, and we've seen him have some pretty big rushing games off the bench in the NFL. And Trevor Lawrence averaged almost 27 rushing yards per start in his career at Clemson. So I'm pretty optimistic about this offensive staff getting the most out of Trevor Lawrence. And I think he's going to be surrounded by what I think has a chance to be a pretty solid, underrated supporting cast right away in Jacksonville.
Yeah. By the way, real quick, I want to go back to the Ridley versus Julio thing. We do have Calvin Ridley at wide receiver 6 right now in our initial rankings for best ball, and we have Julio down at wide receiver 24. I think there can be an argument to tick up Julio, though, ahead of some of these other guys. So we'll certainly look at that harder. But yeah, on Jacksonville, I mean, it's exciting to finally get Urban Meyer in the NFL. I think it's exciting to get Urban Meyer with Trevor Lawrence. You mentioned Darrell Bevel, who was with Russ in Seattle for a while, and then Detroit the last couple of years. I think he did some reasonable things there, although we'll talk about the Seattle situation in a little bit here and what Pete Carroll has done to the offense there, even though he's not the quote unquote offensive mind. But anyways, I think one interesting thing on the Jaguars for the offseason that we've been talking about is this James Robinson situation. And I do think that the Urban Meyer offenses can certainly run the ball, but God, James Robinson, his ADP aligns with thinking that he will be the no doubt feature back this year. And I mean, that's a scary thing to go into. There's no draft capital behind him. They have a ton of picks. They have a ton of money. They could certainly look to upgrade or at least form some timeshare with James Robinson, who had one of the biggest workloads. So that's one I would be careful with on the Jaguars stuff.
Yeah,
sure.
James Robinson is like a screaming sell high in Dynasty. I mean,
yeah.
And I think Jerry Jeudy right now, just to go completely off topic here, but Jerry Jeudy is the best buy low asset in all of Dynasty right now.
Like it. Okay. Chargers. I know you like Brandon Staley. Brandon Staley, the former Rams defensive coordinator, but it's rare these days, and some people consider a mistake to go defensive coordinator as your head coach. Obviously, offense is so much more important in today's NFL. Offensive success, I think, is stickier on a year-to-year basis. I mean, the data all proves that out. And the rules are so skewed towards offense, I think it's really hard to win without a great one. So what happens? Like, let's say your team has a lot of success. Okay, maybe your offense is great. Well, your OC is just going to leave. Like, he's going to get plucked to be the next hot head coaching candidate. So let's say the Chargers come in and they hire Joe Lombardi to be their offensive coordinator. If Joe Lombardi has a lot of success, he's just going to be gone soon. So I think that's interesting. I don't know, though, man. I like Brandon Staley. I know you like Brandon Staley. A lot of people probably don't know a lot about him. What did you think about the Chargers hiring Brandon Staley?
Yeah, I think that anyone who paid attention to the Rams with Brandon Staley in his first and ultimately his only year as their defensive coordinator had to come away really impressed. Brandon Staley used Aaron Donald and Jalen Ramsey in super creative ways to maximize their impacts on games. He would like line up Aaron Donald against the worst offensive linemen, on the opposing team and use him as an edge rusher, or, he was moving all over the defensive line. He wasn't just like a defensive tackle, rushing from the three technique on every play. Jalen Ramsey played a ton of in the star role where he would be like in the middle of the field. He did that a lot at Florida State, and Brandon Staley brought that back. He didn't shadow on a consistent basis number one receivers, and they still had an elite pass defense. Brandon Staley inherited a defense that really it didn't have a great group of pass rushers outside of Aaron Donald by any means. So he emphasized dominating in pass coverage. And that in turn helped the Rams to finish top 8 in quarterback hit rate, top 2 in sack rate, top 4 in defensive DVOA. They allowed the fewest points in the league. Brandon Staley is 38 years old. He seems like he is a really forward-thinking, progressive guy. And I mean, look, the Rams defense, it was not Sean McVay's offense that carried them last year. The defense was the reason that they won 10 games. So I think that Brandon Staley has almost earned our trust to some extent when it comes to Joe Lombardi, who he hired as offensive coordinator. Joe Lombardi he spent a really tough year and a half in 2014 and the first half of 2015 as the Lions offensive coordinator. The Lions ranked 22nd in points scored in 2014 under Joe Lombardi with Matthew Stafford, Calvin Johnson, Reggie Bush, and Golden Tate. So that's not, that's not great. And then Lombardi got fired midway through the following season. He's worked under Sean Payton for a really long time as a Saints quarterbacks coach. He probably deserves some credit for Taysom Hill's development. I think that Taysom Hill probably played better than a lot of people, myself included, expected. I'm not that he's like a franchise quarterback by any means, but I do think he played better than expected this past year as an actual starting quarterback. But yeah, I mean, not the most inspiring offensive coordinator hire, but I'm staying optimistic about this offense because number one, I do trust Brandon Staley's, decision making. I believe in Justin Herbert and Keenan Allen and Austin Eckler and some of the younger, lesser utilized talent that the Chargers got a lot of good snaps out of guys like Jalen Guyton and, Tyron Jackson. And, Tom Telesco is a smart GM, a really underrated GM. And hopefully they can keep Hunter Henry for at least another year. I actually put a futures bet.
We don't want them to keep Hunter Henry. We're trying to free Donald Parham here, buddy.
All right, that's fine. But Donald Parham is another example of these like underrated talents that Tom Telesco was like, yo, we're going to put that guy on our roster.
Yeah.
Okay. But for the benefit of the offense, it would be better if they have both of the guys. Okay. Virgil Green can go, and we can use Hunter Henry and Donald Parham. Okay.
Okay.
But I put a futures bet on the Chargers at 30-1 to win the Super Bowl.
Okay. I mean, from a talent perspective, and I think Brandon Staley will be a talent maximizer on defense. For the last, 3 years, you could make a case that Chargers have had some of the best defensive talent in the league, like legit top 5 NFL defensive talent. They just haven't been good on defense. And I honestly don't know why. And I think Brandon Staley can do a lot for that. And obviously on the other side of the ball, I mean, you're betting on Sean Payton rubbing off on Joe Lombardi. You can say what you want about Sean Payton, but I think he has proven to be one of the best schemers and coaches in the NFL. And so Joe Lombardi had his time in Detroit. Like you said, that was 5 or 6 years ago. Spent the last 5 years with Sean Payton, former Saints quarterbacks coach. I think that there's something there. We can't say, hey, he failed in 2015. He's going to fail in LA, especially with Herbert, man. I mean, I did not like what the Chargers did for a lot of last year, and Justin Herbert succeeded in spite of that, without Austin Eckler and without much else going on. So yeah, I mean, I'm excited about the Chargers too. I think that's an interesting bet for sure. All right. Lions. This one turned into laughing stock after the press conference, which I want to get to. Lions hire Dan Campbell, formerly Sean Payton's right-hand man in New Orleans. I mean, from the outside, Dan Campbell sounds just like a straight football guy, like hand in the dirt, straight football guy. And let me read you a little bit of what he said at his introductory press conference. So he said, and seriously, this is what he said with a straight face. This team is going to be built on, we're going to kick you in the teeth. And when you punch us back, we're going to smile at you. And when you knock us down, we're going to get up. And on the way up, we're going to bite a kneecap off. And we're going to stand up. And then it's going to take 2 more shots to knock us down. And on the way up, we're going to take your other kneecap. And then we're going to get up and take 3 shots to get us down. And when we do, we're going to take another hunk out of you. And before long, we're going to be the last one standing. That's going to be the mentality, right? And so everybody got all over this guy. He's a meathead. He's a football guy. He's going to run the ball on 1st and 10. He's going to run the ball on 2nd and 8, right up the middle. Now you have Jared Goff as your quarterback. You bring in Anthony Lynn as your offensive coordinator. Like, analytics Twitter is like salivating to absolutely crush Dan Campbell. And I don't want to pile on this guy without ever seeing him coach a game for the Lions, but early returns, at least from what he's saying and what it seems like, are not great. How worried should people who own, say, DeAndre Swift or Kenny Golladay, who I think Kenny Golladay will end up franchise tag, but we'll see. How concerned should these people be about the scheme? And we can get to the Goff stuff in the next podcast, but what about just the scheme you think Dan Campbell is going to try to implement?
I mean, he's going to be, I mean, he's not like an offensive schemer. He's like an old school blocking tight end. It's not just, and it's not just Anthony Lynn and Dan Campbell who they hired that are like old school, hand in the dirt football guys. I mean, they hired like Dom Capers. The game passed Dom Capers by, 20 years ago. They hired John Dorsey, who did his best to ruin what Sashi Brown, built in Cleveland, and is just like, wears like a white T-shirt and, a white hat and, white shoes around. I mean, he's just like, and they hired Chris Spielman. I have great respect for Chris Spielman. I mean, you watch his, the documentary about him on NFL Network is awesome. I mean, Chris Spielman is like an inspiration, but you hear him call games because he was an announcer for a long time, and I mean he's a run first, got to establish the run guy. So we like him, but we don't think that that's the way to win in the NFL. And they're actually, the Lions are in a great position to just outright tank. I mean, or at least to do like a soft 1 or 2 year tank, kind of what the Dolphins did in 2019. They're in a really good position to do that and stockpile draft picks. There's no way that they're doing that with Anthony Lynn, Dan Campbell, John Dorsey, Dom Capers, Chris Spielman. I mean, that's not what they're going to do. It's going to be a disaster. I think that this is going to last 2 years max.
Yeah. God. And we didn't even go down the Jared Goff angle, but on the next podcast, we're talking about quarterbacks and quarterbacks changing teams and who we think might change and all that. And we'll get to Jared Goff then. But obviously with Jared Goff, I think a pretty big downgrade for Matthew Stafford, certainly not helping the Dan Campbell situation. And the press conference, it is what it is. I mean, it's just setting a bad tone. And the guy I was most excited about, honestly, was DeAndre Swift. You remove Adrian Peterson, Kerryon Johnson gets another more miles on him. I think they don't want to use him a ton. I was excited for DeAndre Swift, but if they're just going to run him into the middle of the line, I don't know if they're going to do that, but that's going to be scary. And I will say Anthony Lynn was with Austin Eckler for his big year. So maybe it's not as bad as it seems for DeAndre Swift. I just love DeAndre Swift's skill set. I hope it works out for him.
Anthony Lynn, I mean, he's another guy that I have a lot of respect for him as, a man and as a coach. And I think he's the perfect, assistant head coach / running backs. But I don't think you want him to be your offensive coordinator. I don't think you want him to be making, high leverage decisions when it comes to how an offense should look. But that's what he's going to be doing for the Lions, and they have a quarterback now in Jared Goff who is just whenever something is, a little bit off, he just goes to shit. So I don't know how this works. I don't see how it works.
Yeah. Okay. Speaking of not working, the Eagles, I mean, it's kind of not, I don't want to say unprecedented, but dude won a Super Bowl. And, I'm not sure how much credit we can give Doug Peterson for winning that Super Bowl. He never struck me as very sharp. I think he kind of backed into it. And I think, he even said he felt like he was kind of a puppet for guys upstairs. Guys upstairs are in his ear telling him, hey, do you go for it on fourth down here? They're telling him what to do. Do you go for it this 2-point or do you kick the extra point? Personnel decisions, everything. And he was upset about that, and understandably so. He did win a Super Bowl though, and then they just fired him. Bring in new head coach Nick Sirianni, former Colts offensive coordinator. Another young guy, 39 years old, is Nick Sirianni. Was the Colts offensive coordinator the last 3 years, but he didn't get, I don't think, a ton of credit for it because Frank Reich was there as the head coach / offensive guy. What can you tell the people about Nick Sirianni, and how do you think he goes with the Eagles?
Yeah, my initial thought when I saw the Nick Sirianni hire was that the Eagles higher-ups like Jeff Lurie and Howie Roseman, these guys knew that they should have never let Frank Reich get out of the building after that Super Bowl win, or at least that they realized that the trajectory was just like that after they lost Frank Reich. So now I wonder if they're trying to correct or even overcorrect by hiring the guy that was closest to Frank Reich in Indianapolis to replace Doug Peterson, who, I think I wound up basically being exposed as a fake sharp. And Sirianni, he's going to be calling plays in Philly. So Shane Steichen, who was with the Chargers previously, and he did call plays, I think, under Anthony Lynn. He's going to be primarily a game plan guy in Philly. And so this is going to be Nick Sirianni's offense. Nick Sirianni did not call plays with the Colts, but he did learn from one of the best in Frank Reich. And Nick Sirianni coordinated the Indianapolis offense with 3 very different quarterbacks during his 3 years there. Andrew Luck in 2018, Jacoby Brissett in 2019, Phillip Rivers in 2020. Very, very different skill sets between those 3. Mm-hmm. And I think they did a great job of tweaking the offenses from year to year to highlight their quarterback strengths, minimize their weaknesses. They got the ball out of Andrew Luck's hands quicker than ever. Jacoby Brissett holding on to the ball too long has been a problem for him. And they got him to get a little bit quicker in that respect. Phillip Rivers, a guy that a lot of people thought was washed, wound up having a pretty darn good season under Nick Sirianni and Frank Reich. So I recently bet Jalen Hurts at 100-1 MVP, and then I took it again at 80-1 after they formally traded Carson Wentz. That's one of my early long shot picks. So I'm rooting for these guys. in Philly. And obviously for them to give Hurts a full year under center, they do have the number 6 overall pick. And, they might use that on a quarterback.
Yeah. We'll get to Hurts on the next quarterback podcast for sure. I mean, I agree with you totally that Doug Peterson was exposed as a fake sharp. I mean, it was just like kind of obvious and the higher ups in the Eagles, I think, are more influential than most teams. Like Harry Roseman and Jeffrey Lurie are very, very influential on what goes on the field, implementing analytics, forcing their coaches to kind of play by their rules. So yeah, I think that it's interesting. NFC East is obviously very much up for the taking. Even if Dak comes back healthy, I think it is.
I did want to say Frank Reich. I read this great article in the Indianapolis Star. I believe it was by Stephen Holder a couple of years ago. Frank Reich, when he was hired initially by Indianapolis, he talked about how in Philadelphia, what they did was they did research projects on all of the old school conventional wisdom around the NFL to really try to figure out and be able to, show evidence that this stuff actually was true. And they went back and all the things that are considered to be correct in the, across the NFL. And they did actual research projects to figure out whether they were factual or non-factual. I'm sure that he had his coaches in Indianapolis doing similar stuff, like Nick Sirianni. So I definitely think there's going to be an element of analytics or probably a strong element of analytics that remains or is even becomes more prominent now with Nick Sirianni in Philadelphia under Howie Roseman.
Oh, yeah. And they don't just ask their coaches to do it. They hire people like Urban Meyer. They say, Josh, is it true that you need to run the ball in order for play action to be effective? And Josh goes in and looks at all the data and comes out with the conclusion that no, you can run play action on 10 straight plays, and it still has the same effect as if you had a quote unquote threat of the run game. So yeah, all those projects like that. People ask like, how can you use analytics in the NFL? Stuff like that. I think, the stuff that everybody talks about is, should you go for it on this 4th down? Should you go for 2 here or not? Like, yeah, that's part of it, but that's such a small part of it. There's plenty of football guy stuff that you can do in there with the data also. And I agree, the Eagles are at the cutting edge of that for sure. Texans. I mean, the Texans have become the laughing stock of the league, man. I mean, it's insane the players in draft capital they've punted off. The 3rd rounder for Duke Johnson, they give up DeAndre Hopkins. For David Johnson, they give up a 2nd rounder for Brandon Cooks. They gave up Clowney. They didn't get anything for Watt. I mean, I could go on and on. The bottom line is this is a tough situation with David Culley, and we could throw in that Deshaun Watson is like tilted out of his mind. But David Culley, 65 years old, he has a reputation of bringing locker rooms together, I think, and kind of organizing teams well, and he'll need that. Stepped into an absolute mess, but he's been with Philly, with KC, with Buffalo, most recently with Baltimore as their passing game coordinator and wide receiver coach. Did not exactly excel there with Lamar Jackson last season, not making too much progress as a thrower. There's probably a lot of people out there who don't know a lot about David Culley. Evan, what can you tell them about him and how you think he'll fare with this mess of a Texans team? Yeah,
so this was kind of a head-scratching hire based on merit because after the Ravens' playoff loss, they caught a ton of heat for running a really rudimentary passing offense with overly basic route concepts, and the wide receivers were getting no help from the scheme. And David Culley was the Ravens passing game coordinator and wide receivers coach. So those were his babies. But I did like, though, that the Texans retained Tim Kelly as their offensive coordinator because I think that he's one of the most underrated offensive minds in the league. He has extensive history with Deshaun Watson. And if the Texans do keep Deshaun Watson, Tim Kelly knows how to use him and let him play outside of structure. Remember, Deshaun Watson opened the 2020 season struggling with Bill O'Brien running the offense when they turned it over fully to Tim Kelly. There was actually one point where they opened the season with Tim Kelly as the OC, and then Bill O'Brien took back offensive play calling, and then they fired Bill O'Brien, and then Tim Kelly ran the show the rest of the way, and Deshaun Watson was awesome the rest of the way. But and Tim Kelly gets that you have to let him play outside of structure. That's where he is so dominant, sometimes impossible to defend. But But yeah, the David Culley hire almost seems impossible to really evaluate in the moment because there are still so many moving parts elsewhere in the organization. First and foremost, the future of Deshaun Watson, and to a lesser extent, Will Fuller, who is a free agent. I think it's interesting on DraftKings Sportsbook right now. Deshaun Watson is plus 250 to play his first snap with the Houston Texans of the 2021 season. I had to take it. What do you think about it?
Yeah, I know that the Texans are absolute donkeys. They are not donkeys to the point where they give away one of the 5 best quarterbacks in the entire NFL. Like, what would equal value be? Like, I wouldn't take Trevor Lawrence for Deshaun Watson, would you?
Yeah, I probably would.
You'd rather have Lawrence than Watson?
I probably would, but I don't think that that's in play. I think what would be in play would be like several first round picks.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, there's just no way that I would do it for that. I don't think, unless I was just going for a full rebuild and thought by the time I was ready, Deshaun Watson would be out of range age wise. But no, I think the most likely scenario is that Deshaun tries to force his way out and they end up getting nothing, and probably Deshaun Watson ends up reporting. I mean, it takes some balls to try to sit out a whole year, pull the Carson Palmer on the Bengals, sit out the whole year. But man, I understand why Deshaun Watson's tilted. It's also February. I mean, we have a long way to go for him to cool off and not get as tilted, and for David Culley to get in there. I presume what he was hired to do was to try to like bring this team back together. Because as you said, on merit, on football alone, David Culley did not deserve this job. So.
Yeah, and I mean, the Texans could also go to Deshaun Watson and be like, hey, we will give you more money.
Yeah.
I mean.
Even though he just signed a new contract like a year ago.
Yeah, but I mean, yeah, right. But money, is a big, big difference maker. I mean, it's really been his agent, Deshaun Watson's agent that has been outspoken about this. And, hey, what is the agent in this for? I mean, he's in it to try to enrich his client as much as he possibly can during the short window that Deshaun Watson gets to play in the NFL. And so
also put him on a team that doesn't trade away DeAndre Hopkins for David Johnson. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, that would tilt me the most.
There are two sides to this. First of all, the Texans have so lost their fan base at this point. I mean, could they afford to? I mean, who's going to go to the games if they trade away Deshaun Watson? Number one, people are going to be like, refund my season tickets. There's no way, I'm paying you guys for this. Yeah. And then there's also, I actually think it would be in the Texans' best interest. This might sound crazy. I think it would be in the Texans' best interest to trade Deshaun Watson because they have no assets at all. I mean, they have nothing on defense. They have, Will Fuller's a free agent. They got Brandon Cooks. They got maybe some decent offensive linemen, Laramie Tunsil and Nick Martin, but
they've given away all their draft capital to get Laramie Tunsil, and they have like no draft capital either.
Well, I think that they should do like a long tank. Like they should just trade everyone, but they already started screwing themselves by giving up this JJ Watt for nothing. And then, and it was almost like they did that like for PR, that Rap Sheet can say, oh, what a classy move by the Texans. Right. I think you tweeted about this, right? It wasn't a classy move. It was an idiotic move. I mean,
I know, man.
I don't know.
I tweeted about it a few times, and I agree that JJ Watt at his contract probably wouldn't have fetched more than a 3rd round pick. But God damn it, man, I'm not giving away. I mean, I'm out for blood, man. I'm not being nice to a guy when I can get a 3rd round pick.
Yeah, and I mean, why do they have to do it so quickly? Like they couldn't wait until March or April to do it. Like, so I mean, they just did it so that Rap Sheet could tweet RT with classy above the move.
Right. I mean,
because they're so sensitive to PR right now.
So the thing is, in the NFL, man, these long tanks, just like teams don't do it. I mean, you can't survive long enough. Sashi couldn't survive. Even in the NBA, Hinkie couldn't survive long enough to see it through. And like for the amount of time it would take the Texans to tank, they're just going to try to win 5-6 games thanks to Deshaun Watson for the next 4 or 5 years. And, it's just not it's just so bad.
Yeah.
Jets, speaking of so bad. Another defensive guy. So much like Brandon Saleh, I think Brandon Staley, Robert Saleh was one of the most qualified, one of the most accomplished, one of the most impressive candidates out there. Highly sought after defensive coordinator of the 49ers from 2017 to 2020. He brings in Mike LaFleur to be the offensive coordinator, former 49ers pass game coordinator. He's like a Kyle Shanahan guy. I believe he was with Kyle Shanahan in Atlanta. And yes, he is obviously he was with him in San Francisco too. And then, yes, he is the younger brother of Packers head coach Matt LaFleur is Mike LaFleur. So yeah, Robert Saleh had a lot of talent on the defensive line in San Francisco. Still, they were pretty dominant at times. He seems like a very impressive guy. What did you think about the Jets hiring Mr. Saleh?
Yeah, he comes from the Pete Carroll, Gus Bradley, Seahawks style coaching tree. I know that his, sort of his image was really, really strong in San Francisco. But, I mean, his defenses were about as good as his talent. He had insane talent in 2019, and they were dominant. In 2018, he didn't have insane talent. They weren't great on defense. This past year, they kind of held it together a little bit defensively, but, they lost a lot of talent due to injuries, and they weren't that good ultimately. But he seems like he's going to be a fiery motivator, and he could be a successful, leader of men type as a head coach for the Jets. I think for our purposes, for fantasy purposes, we're much more concerned with Mike LaFleur. But we also just don't know the direction of the Jets offense almost whatsoever at this point because Sam Darnold's future is unclear. The Jets are loaded with draft picks. They have 2 first-rounders. They're picking at number 2 and number 23. Plus the 34th overall pick, and they have 6 top 100 picks overall. So it seems like they're going to draft Justin Fields out of Ohio State or Zach Wilson of BYU at number 2 overall. And I really fully expect them to move on from Sam Darnold and draft one of those guys and play him right away because that is easily the best move for their GM, Joe Douglas. Joe Douglas did not draft Sam Darnold. He did not hire Adam Gase. He can chalk up this first, year and a half that he's been their GM is just, hey, I had to deal with Adam Gase. I had to deal with a quarterback that I didn't pick, and now he can just wipe the slate clean and hire, he hires this full, new coaching staff and drafts a new quarterback with a clean slate. And so I think that all that works in the best interest of Joe Douglas' short and long-term job security. And at the end of the day, for so many front office guys, this is just about how long can I keep my job, where I'm, the toast of the town if I'm doing well. And even if I'm not doing well, I'm banking, millions and millions of dollars every year.
Right. Yeah. And I think I'm optimistic. I mean, I don't know a ton about Mike LaFleur, but I'm just optimistic from the Kyle Shanahan tree. Like Kyle Shanahan, obviously, one of the biggest talent maximizers in the entire league. And so that would give me some optimism there. But like you said, we'll see on what the exact offense looks like for sure. All right. That's it for the head coaches. Let's just get to some of these offensive coordinator things here quickly. The Seahawks one, man, I honestly think that Brian Schottenheimer was fired for throwing too much. And I know that sounds insane because all we do is beg the Seahawks to throw more. We still don't think they're throwing enough. But I think that Brian Schottenheimer wanted to throw it. And then halfway through the year, Pete Carroll was like, nah, man, we're going back to establishing the shit out of the run. And then at the end of the year, they were like, you're out of here. We're going to get somebody in here who's going to listen to us. And that is that guy, Shane Waldron, the new offensive coordinator of the Seahawks, former Rams pass game coordinator, 41 years old. He's a McVay guy, comes from the McVay tree, was with Washington, I believe, and then with the Rams from 2018 to 2020. So yeah, it's just an interesting thing where I don't want to say like a puppet Shane Waldron will be, but you can be sure that Pete Carroll is going to be telling this guy, hey man, we're running the ball. And so, it's hard to say that Waldron's going to be able to put his actual stamp on this offense. But what do you think about what the Seahawks did? Yeah, and Brian Schottenheimer, I agree with you. He wound up getting a tough shake in Seattle because he showed he was willing to be flexible. Brian Schottenheimer came in with that, the history of being very run heavy wherever he had been. He's the son of Marty Schottenheimer, RIP, Marty Ball. And he let Russ cook for the first half of last season. But then he had the rug pulled out from beneath him when Russ threw a handful of picks around mid-year, and Pete Carroll was like, yeah, hey, we're going back to playing ground and pound ball. So the Seahawks fire Brian Schottenheimer. They extend Pete Carroll through 2025, which is amazing since Pete Carroll is going to be 70 years old this season. He's the oldest head coach in the NFL.
And so you wonder what kind of impact Shane Waldron is really going to have at all on the design and the approach of the offense, since Pete Carroll has so much say, and we know what Pete Carroll wants to do. But Shane Waldron, he was definitely a guy that you heard of during Sean McVay being his right-hand man with the Rams, and also that he actually came from Washington with Sean McVay. He worked with Sean McVay in Washington. Yeah. But I just think, I think it's going to be, really Shane Waldron carrying out the marching orders for Pete Carroll, and that puts Shane Waldron in the position of just doing whatever Pete Carroll says he should do.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, Titans, it's easy to say Todd Downing, who's their new offensive coordinator. Well, it'll be the same because he was the tight end coach. He's an in-house promotion. He'll just fill in for Arthur Smith. Arthur Smith seems like a really talented dude to me, so I'm not going to go ahead and just immediately say, oh, this is going to be super seamless. Everything's going to be fine. They're going to be just as efficient as they've been the last couple of years. They've been under Arthur Smith. I don't know much about Todd Downing, so I don't want to say that he can't do what Arthur Smith did, but it's a pretty high bar to me. So if anything, I think there's more downside than upside from a scheme perspective with the Titans. Any comments on what you think Todd Downing is going to do or play out for the Titans?
Well, I don't, know for sure that there's going to be, a smooth transition, an easy, smooth transition by any means. But I do know that teams do this kind of thing where they lose an OC and they promote from within. The goal is to maintain continuity, because the Titans have a good thing going. I mean, they've got Ryan Tannehill under contract long-term. They've got A.J. Brown under contract long-term. Derrick Henry is under contract long-term. Most of the offensive line is coming back. I think maybe all the offensive line is coming back. And Todd Downing was basically Arthur Smith before Arthur Smith became Arthur Smith, because before Arthur Smith became the Titans offensive coordinator, he was the Titans tight ends coach. And Todd Downing moved into that role, and now he elevates to offensive coordinator. So, and Mike Vrabel is another guy who I think is pretty hands-on, for his team, or at least, he wants his team like built in his image. And so I think it's all about continuity. I don't know that the outcome is going to be similar to how it was under Arthur Smith, but I do think the offensive approach is going to be similar.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. Dolphins, Chen Gailey is out. They're going with kind of a rare thing. You see this in college a lot, but they're going to have co-offensive coordinators in Eric Studesville and George Godsey. Studesville's been the running backs coach and run game coordinator. Godsey was more working with the quarterbacks and the tight ends. So, maybe it can work. I don't think they've announced yet who's going to call plays, but you can see them kind of working on different things. Maybe it's just a title thing, and we shouldn't be overemphasizing it too much. But what do you think about the co-offensive coordinator plan in Miami?
Well, I like a lot of what the Dolphins have done since, Chris Greer really took control as their GM. They hired Brian Flores. But one of the things I think they have not handled perfectly was, the quarterback situation in 2020. And Chan Gailey, Ryan Fitzpatrick was his guy, and, from Buffalo. And I guarantee you Chan Gailey was like, I don't know why we're putting in Tua, we need a role with Fitzpatrick. Fitzpatrick was playing great. He was getting the ball to their playmakers. Gesicki was making plays with Fitzpatrick. Devontae Parker was, when Devontae Parker was healthy and Ryan Fitzpatrick was his quarterback this past year and even the previous year, like Devontae Parker was excellent. So, I'm sure that had a big impact on why Chan Gailey is no longer there. They're now on their third offensive coordinator situation in 3 years under Brian Flores, because they started off with Chad O'Shea in 2019, and then Chan Gailey this past year, and now this co-offensive coordinator thing. My guess is that Godsey and Studesville, are going to be, very much more embracing of Tua as the Dolphins starting quarterback. Although they have, they have the third overall pick?
I believe so.
Yeah. They have the third overall pick and number 18, and they have 4 top 50 picks. They could take a quarterback. I know it might seem crazy after they took Tua, but Tua didn't show enough. And the Dolphins, after just absolutely fleecing the Texans of their first and second round picks in this draft, they're they're in an awesome position to be extremely flexible. They could also trade down out of number 3. I mean, there are considered to be 3 elite quarterbacks in this draft. And the Dolphins at number 3 are in position to get one of them or to trade it to a team that, needs a quarterback. I mean, this is an unbelievable position to be in. The Dolphins have a really exciting future if they can, if they can just get some of these decisions right.
Yeah. And I don't have a problem with continuing to fire at the quarterback position. It creates weird dynamics within the team, but the most valuable thing maybe in sports is having an excellent top tier starting quarterback on his rookie contract. And so if you just keep firing and firing and firing until you hit one, I'm okay with that. It's just so important. It's just, I don't know, man. I don't want to write off Tua. And I agree. I mean, he was not good last year, but man, it's just writing Tua off after 1 year. I think
it's unfair. It's unfair.
Yeah.
But you know what they could also do, man? They could package Tua and 3 and 18 and try to make a run at Deshaun Watson. I mean,
right. That'd be an interesting
That
deal.
would be really interesting. I mean, a lot of people are talking about the Panthers going after Deshaun Watson.
Yeah.
The Dolphins are really in position to go after Deshaun Watson.
Yeah. Man, Dolphins and Texans making trades. I mean, they're just the Texans just own them. I mean, gosh. Okay. A couple more here. Vikings. So the cocoon is strong here with the Gary Kubiak situation. Gary Kubiak retires, and who do they hire? Clint Kubiak. Of course, not a coincidence that his last name is Kubiak. It is Gary Kubiak's son. He's only 34. He was with Gary in Denver, of course. I believe Clint was actually in Minnesota on his own before, but then went with Gary to Denver. He's been coaching quarterbacks under Gary for the Vikings for the last 2 seasons. But I mean, I just watched the Real Sports thing about the Rooney Rule, and this is the kind of stuff that, I mean, it's just on this. I'm not saying Clint Kubiak's not qualified, because I don't know if if he is or he's not, but it just looks really, really, really bad. The Vikings, there's a lot of nepotism with the Vikings. Mike Zimmer's son, Adam, is their linebackers coach. And also Paul Gunther, who's Mike Zimmer knew from Cincinnati. He's on the staff too with some weird job that doesn't exist elsewhere in the NFL. So yeah, the cocoon is very strong with Minnesota. It's just, I don't know. It doesn't strike me as the right move here to go with Clint Kubiak, but I'm only saying that because the nepotism thing, I honestly don't know. Do you know anything that can be positive about Clint Kubiak? How do you think this one's going to go?
I mean, I think, they just hired Gary Kubiak. I don't think there's a whole lot of analysis to do here. It's going to be Dalvin Cook, again, play after play after play. And, they're running it back there's a lot of continuity, at least in the skill position core. They need to, continue to try to get offensive linemen, people that can block. But, yeah, there's not a lot of analysis here. We know what they're going to do.
Yeah. And I mean, I think Kyle Rudolph, refused a pay cut. He could be moving on. And, Irv, Justin Jefferson, Thielen, Dalvin, they have some players for sure. So last one, Pittsburgh Steelers. Randy Fichtner is out. Matt Canada promoted from within, the quarterbacks coach. I think there's been a lot of fair criticisms of Fichtner over the last few years. I don't even know if I'm saying that right. Fichtner. But I do think he gets a lot of credit for developing the wide receivers that were hits for them so successfully, Antonio Brown and Santonio, Manny Sanders, Mike Wallace, Deontay Johnson. But anyways, Canada was the longtime college coach, Steelers quarterback coach last year. Big Ben obviously approves. I think that they need to change a lot. They had no run game last year, and it was so short. I mean, their average depth of target was so short. And that goes against what Ben did for a lot of his career. So hopefully Canada can get him throwing vertically again. We'll see if that's an arm issue or a scheme issue, because Big Ben is obviously on his last legs. I think anybody who's watched that can see it. What do you think about what the Steelers did at the offensive coordinator position?
Ben is the Steelers offensive coordinator. So,
yeah.
I think this is just a move that was probably engineered by Ben. I think that they had a little bit of before this, Randy Fichtner was his boy. And then they had a little bit of a falling out this past year. I think there were some rumors of that. And now we see Fichtner fired and Matt Canada promoted. So, I mean, Ben's going to be running the show until Ben's not running the show. And that time is coming, very, very quickly, I think, very, very soon. Yeah. But it looks like Ben is absolutely going to be back as the Steelers quarterback in 2021. And Matt Canada is going to be, on the sidelines holding the clipboard, pretending to do something.
Steelers desperately need to invest in a quarterback. I mean, it's clear Ben is on his way out, and they have, I mean, such little behind Ben. They don't really have any developmental prospects to speak of. They need to get on the quarterback situation for sure. And, everybody killed the Eagles. Well, we'll talk about the Eagles on the next one, actually. On the next pod, we will talk about various quarterback situations in the league, the trades that went down, some interesting situations that we think. So thanks to everybody for listening to this coaching analysis podcast. We'll be back, later in the offseason when we have more data on what the rosters will look like and a little bit more on these coaches, and we think how it'll fare more from a fantasy perspective for some of these guys. Stay tuned for that. For Evan, for producer Luke, I am Adam. Good luck, everybody.